Vivian, it's always great to engage with you about these issues. It's the day after the budget. You and I have both done media articles and appearances, and I'm aware of some of your views, but what would you say the bottom line is? I mean, if you're wanting to sum up the budget, how would you do so? What's for you the principal issue here?
For me, the principal issue is in getting the minister to give us leadership as to how we would solve the most important problem in South Africa, which is unemployment, and from a fiscal policy point of view, which is one of the great institutions of our government, how would we use that as a mechanism to show leadership and help bring stakeholders, if you like to use that word, come together to solve that problem. And we looked at what the government said, and to my mind it didn't really work well to addressing that problem. The government came up with solutions like we would increase UIF, we would increase public expenditure in terms of the public works program, we would increase what a term that is becoming very, very familiar in South Africa, and we have not really questioned what it really means, job opportunities, because the government says we would create 6 million job opportunities, and we need to start interrogating and asking ourselves, what does this mean? What is the meaning of job opportunities? How do they benefit solving the problem of unemployment, where we've become so comfortable sitting at a 25% unemployment rate for a very long time, and we're just becoming really used to being an underperformer, if you want to use that term.
Sure, and are government-created jobs that create wealth, or jobs that consume wealth? Is the country poorer after government-created jobs, or richer? The government can employ people to crinkle paper or dig ditches and refill them. Are those jobs? I mean, so this terminology, you're absolutely right, needs to be interrogated. Are these jobs net contributors to wealth, or net losers of wealth?
I think one of the points is, I mean, if we look at it from a sustainability point of view, the first point that I would like to make on that is, firstly, these are not sustainable jobs. These are some things that will be for a 3-month period, a 1-month period, or maybe a 6-month period. And like you say, are they a net contributor to wealth or net users of wealth? We need to interrogate that, because there is a perception that if we by some means put money in the hands of governments, and the government hire people to dig roads and do all these kind of things, by some means we add in value to the economy. If that is true, because at the end of the day, our biggest problem is jobs, and whatever it is that really contributes adding value to the economy and creating jobs, that is what we should promote. And I think that we have not seen any other economy where that has been a sustainable model, and if that is something that works here, we should be able to really do a proper statistical and economic analysis of that. And so this really works, and the government is solving this problem, and we can promote it. Otherwise, I think what has proven to work in other instances in other countries is that the private sector is a net creator of wealth, is the net creator of sustainable jobs and contributing value to the economy.
I couldn't agree more, Vivian. You've said to me that your concern is that the critical issues in the economy, the growth, you've mentioned unemployment, but to what extent does this budget address or consider or provide solutions to the other big questions in South Africa? Capital formation, savings, growth, the value of the rand, the big issues to an economy. How do you feel the budget addresses these?
I think on an outside look and the way the minister comes across, you might be tempted to say this is it, because the minister came across very strongly and very convincing and saying we want to grow the economy, we want to increase growth rates. He came up with his growth rates. We want to move this country forward. We want inclusive growth. We want transformation. The minister came across very strongly on these issues as the way he was talking. But if you want to take a critical look and say, how do we intend to realize this objective? That is where I think this speech fell short of redressing the how are we going to do that, because in the view of the minister, if we increase the public spending within government, we would realize growth, which to me it's wanting. According to the minister, if we increase the number of people on grant, we are solving the problem of poverty, which for me it's a wrong solution to the problem. And I mean, the list goes on and on. If you look at people who stay out of jobs, the minister says, okay, let's get people more on UIF. It will help us solve unemployment. And they were coming with lots of proposed solutions, but in terms of how are we going to do that, this budget fell short of redressing those problems.
No, you don't have prosperity because the minister wants it. You have prosperity because the minister has good policies that result in it. I mean, one of the things is that he endlessly spoke about how much more they're going to spend on welfare and grants and handouts and subsidies and concessions, and all of those would consume wealth. And you know, if you subsidize something, there's a simple law of economics, you get it. If you subsidize poverty, you get more poverty. If you pay people to be poor, you reward them for being unemployed and unproductive, you have more people who are unemployed and unproductive. So it's a very perverse idea that you alleviate poverty by rewarding poverty, by encouraging poverty. All you do is you increase it.
Can these intentions magically turn to realization? For me, my best guess is no. We can't be looking at a direction where we want to go and actually be driving on the opposite direction and hope that we will get to somewhere where we want to arrive. And I think time will tell. We're watching 12 months down the line to see whether government's intentions, as they clearly said, it's growth. We want growth. I mean, the minister came out very strongly about we want growth, we want transformation, we want things to happen for the better of all South Africans. But something that was very subtle, you look at what is happening with the labor regime in South Africa and organized labor. The minister failed to mention the unions or the platinum sector and its contribution to job creation and what is happening. And for me, that was quite interesting to see that he really avoided. And for me, it speaks to election year budget speech where the minister doesn't want to offend certain stakeholders, if you like to call it that.
Yes, it is a bit of an election budget, and you sound like the economist Davy Ruet, who also says the single most important thing is growth. If you have growth, everything else follows, according to the international data. Talk of international statistics. The budget as a proportion of GDP in South Africa is now higher than it has ever been in our history, and now amongst the highest in the world. And if you equate what South Africans will pay in tax for the year, and you say what proportion of our income and make that equal to the year, it means that South Africans will all be working for the government until the 22nd of May, over 38% of the GDP in tax, and only then will they start working for themselves. So we, as we sit here now, are actually working for the government, not for ourselves. And Tax Freedom Day will be later than ever before. It will be a full 5 weeks later than it was, for example, in 1996. In other words, more than a month. Now, the world's experience tells you that with that amount of money being taken out of the economy by the government, there cannot actually be prosperity.
That's interesting, because for me, as I was thinking and looking about that, I was asking myself, what does this budget mean for an ordinary South African on the streets of Louw, Alexandra, or anywhere else within the economy? I mean, we've seen economists and investors and politicians and everyone else talking about the budget. It's like something that there is the economic or the informed sector of us who know these things, and these things concern us, and there is a majority of the people out there who would be directly and indirectly affected by this budget, and who clearly don't understand what this is all about. And for me, I was thinking, if we look at the direct and indirect tax on the poor, it's really something that is bad for the economy, because we're trying to get people out of poverty, but they're already doing things that will keep them perpetually in poverty.
Yes, and then not only is the tax higher than it's ever been, but the spending is even higher by an additional 4% deficit. So the government is doing what it tells citizens not to do, which is to become over-indebted. And it complains about the debt crisis and the over-indebtedness, as mentioned by the minister. And yet, in the very budget in which he complains about it, he is himself becoming over-indebted by any reasonable criterion.
That is interesting, because we have a government which, on one hand, tries to control people and how they spend and how they borrow, and trying to put in place credit regulations. But it's a government who teaches us just the wrong example.
Sets the absolute worst example.
It's interesting.
Yeah. And also the other fascinating contradiction is the minister says there needs to be regulatory relief, especially for small business. But as he says so, there is in the parliament in which he's giving that address his own bill on the draft financial market regulation bill, or whatever it's called. While he is saying that there should be less regulation, he is himself introducing one of the most extreme forms of over-regulation imaginable.
That is quite interesting, because when you look at our capital market and the role of capital market in raising the finance and the capital that we need for growth and creating the jobs, and you see regulations like that and bills like that before Parliament, and you act, the government is saying one thing on the one hand, and on the other hand it's doing the direct opposite. And
as someone said, the government's left hand doesn't know what its other left hand is doing, and that seems to be the case. I mean, for me there was a fascinating contradiction. I would love to sit with the minister and say, Minister, please explain how you can say one thing and do the exact opposite in a number of instances. You can say that people need to watch debt, and you yourself run up debt on an unprecedented scale. You say that we should reduce regulatory burden, and you yourself impose an unprecedented level of burden, and so on. I mean, and you say you want, you know, one of the other fascinating things for me is he blames suppliers for procurement and landlords for rent for overcharging the government, which is very strange. If somebody offers to pay more rent, it would be a very strange landlord who says no. And the problem is, of course, his own people wasting money.
Interesting, Delion, because when I looked at the aspect of the government saying that they will become more fiscal disciplined within the public sector and cut out the fat and check the corruption and all that, and you ask yourself, this is just rebranding. Because for me, the critical question at this point is, within the last budget and within these administrations, we already set up institutions, including new ministers in the presidency in charge of monitoring and evaluation. What has been the impact of that? We've just rebranded and say now we're going to be more fiscal discipline, because we already have that, but are those institutions working? And if they are not working, why are they not working?
Yes, an entire government department was created for this, with one of the top officials, you know, one of the people considered one of the heavyweights. And the minister now is effectively saying that all of that has failed, and hasn't actually suggested any alternative that has a prospect of success. If that failed, what is he doing other than talking? So it's a budget that seems to be a lot of talk with little changing, little actual, there's very little to it of substance.
And another interesting thing that came up for me this morning, and even with my conversation and interview with the Deputy Minister, was I said, Minister, nothing new or nothing outstanding came out of this budget. For me, it was just a kind of holding the fiscal line and kind of a continuation of what's been happening. There was no bold step, and the minister,
which has failed.
And the minister says, yes, I think there was no bold step, and that was quite interesting to see the government acknowledge that we're just walking on the path on which we have been, and hoping that things will change.
So we have a path that is a monumental failure, and we're continuing on the path.
And hoping to.
So we continue doing the same thing, but we hope it will have a different consequence, which is really very disappointing. Well, I think we've captured the essence of it. Now, we've been a bit critical. What could you say that's good about the budget? Anything that you were pleased to hear? Was there anything positive?
I think I was pleased to hear that from a taxation and fiscal discipline point of view, the minister is still very, very disciplined in terms of collecting revenue. We've seen SARS as one of the most efficient state institutions, and the minister has said we're going to streamline its functions and it will become more efficient in terms of business administration, administrative bottlenecks, especially for small businesses, which for me it's a good thing that any small business gets into SARS and things are processed efficiently. The minister also talked about centralization when it comes to the customs and custom duties. You can do everything.
One-stop shop sort of thing.
And all that, which for me would be a good plus.
Well, I suppose for me the one big positive was the shift of government spending to infrastructure spending from consumption spending. Now, I would like to see that infrastructure spending in the form of outsourcing and private operators and public-private partnerships. But nonetheless, if government is going to be spending more money than ever before, at least it should be investing it in something with some lasting and sustainable value, and not wasting it on recurrent expenditure. I don't know if you felt there was something positive there.
I think I felt the same.
Yeah. Well, I think we've summed it up, and next year maybe the Minister will have the wisdom to consult us before the budget instead of waiting to see what we say after it.
That's right.